Hello, folks. Welcome back to Mindful Metal Jacket, the best damn podcast in the sky. I'm a little punchy. I'm recording many intros in a row. And you guys, you're going to hear this episode was recorded on a Victrola 1946. RCA Records put this out. Today's guest is my pal, comedian, and many other things, but comedian and pal to me, Tim Finkel. This was recorded. I worked with Tim 17 years ago at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle. Great club. Fun fact, Mark Ridley is credited with creating the 3-person show format that you see at most comedy clubs, MC, feature, headliner. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard, and I've been telling everybody. Anyways, and I'll be back in Royal Oak in October 19th to the 21st. My last gig before I have a child. So come out to that. I really need to sell some tickets and hit bonus because it's the last time I'll work for 5 years. So Royal Oak, October 19th to the 21st. That's where I met today's guest, my pal, Tim Finkel. Fascinating guy, great guy. One of these guys, you meet him and you go, I like this guy. He's got electric energy and just a big smile. Reminds me of Ryan Hamilton, wonderful guy who has similar qualities. This was a great conversation. I feel terrible. Tim was excited to be on the show. We recorded it. We had a great time. He was awesome. And I didn't release it for 14 years. So it's finally out. I'm excited for it. I'm excited for you to hear it. I'm excited for you to meet Tim. Tim talks, we went deep here. Tim talks about his the sudden death of his brother and how he dealt with that, how he works with kids with, I believe, behavioral problems. He teaches comedy. He is a comedian. He's got a beautiful wife, which has really nothing to do with any of this. Hey, maybe he talks about her, but I met her and I was like, wow, you really did it, buddy. But that speaks to the nature of what a sweet and hilarious guy he is. So I'm excited. It was fun to re-listen to this. I hadn't listened to it in 17 years. So it was, is it funny that the number changes every time? I think it is. I hope you're enjoying yourselves out there. But yeah, Tim is awesome. Make sure you check him out, follow him. What else? I can't even remember what else we talked about. It was a big, deep, rich episode. And I think it's going to really resonate with a lot of people, especially if you've experienced loss like that. And we get into what it takes to recover from serious loss. And we talk about his parents and his career and all these great things. And he's a man doing service. And I love that. So enjoy this episode. Reach out to Tim. Tell him how much you enjoyed it. Follow him on all the things you follow, people and places or whatever. I don't know. I got to rehearse these better, but it's a great episode. Once again, also, this episode is recorded on Zoom. Sorry, it's not 4K and HD and all that stuff. I think the next episode is. We're back to shooting in the modern era. So it's Zoom. Accept it. This show is all about acceptance. And it was during the pandemic. We were far away from each other, but we made it work. And I think if you can be patient and adjust, you'll deal with the audio. I think the audio might be a little bit, echoey, but I hope that you're willing to put up with it because you're going to get a lot out of it if you do. So apologies for the crudity of the audio and visual. It was over Zoom. It was a different time, folks. If I could get in my DeLorean and go back to 1985 and save the pine trees. What a great film, Back to the Future. Don't you think? I love it. So should you. But before you love that, you should love this episode with myself and my pal, Tim Finkel, coming at you. Mindful Metal Jacket. I love you. All right, we're here. I'm here with comedian Tim Finkel. This is so exciting.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Joe. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks. I got to say, this is the first Mindful Metal Jacket I've recorded in about 2 months. You're it. This is the comeback, so no pressure.
Yeah. What season are we on here? Season 3, season 4?
I guess so. I might try to start doing it with seasons because it's very difficult. I mean, I have a plethora of podcasts, and I'm one of many people. I think this is the thing that happened a lot with pandemic is comedians or people in general, but I think especially comedians, were home with nothing to do. So I was like, I got to figure out something to do. So you just keep making podcasts, and then real life comes back. You're on the road, you're living a life, and you're like, shit, I have 9 podcasts now.
Yeah.
So,
you overextend yourself.
yeah, it's a little overwhelming. So I'm going to try to, this might not be the first one that re-airs. I'm going to try to can a bunch of them, or what if you bank a bunch of them. But you're the first one back. And it's funny because we met a week ago. By the time this comes out, it might be 3 years ago, but we met at the Comedy Castle in Royal Oak, Michigan. And the reason I was like, I got to start recording more of these. First of all, it was really interesting talking to you about your stuff. And then also so many people came up and were like, I love that podcast. You got to bring it back. So this is back by popular demand.
Yeah, that's great. I felt like, it seemed like the audience last weekend, whenever, when I was bringing you on stage and mentioned Mindful Metal Jacket, it seemed like they really lit up for that. So yeah, I think you got a good following with it.
Yeah, I think it's a small but mighty following, very loyal following. And I always say this, but like the nicest things anyone's ever said to me about anything I've ever done have been about the podcast. So I guess it's helpful for people that feel weird about going to therapy or can't afford therapy. They get 2 comedians yapping.
Yeah.
But
I don't know how effective that is.
yeah, I don't know. There's some wisdom every once in a while, and I've interviewed some real experty type people. So I'm looking at 2 books of people I've interviewed. Judd Brewer, Unwinding Anxiety, which is a great book, and then How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price, which was helpful to me for about 2 weeks, and now I'm back to being addicted to my phone. How are you with the phone? Are you okay with your phone?
I'm terrible with the phone. I feel like every day I get more addicted to it. And now I have 2 phones. So I have a phone for work and a personal phone, and now I'm juggling both of them. And I try to take calculated breaks from it, but it's not good.
No, it's difficult. And I read this book. It's fantastic. And I interviewed her. We had a great talk, and you have all the information of like how horrible it is and bad it is and all this stuff, but it's in there. And I was talking to my friend the other day of like, it does actually feel harder to kick than heroin, because like food addiction, you do need it. You do need the phone. It's not possible to exist in our society right now without a smartphone. You need a vaccine passport. You need your maps. I mean, so many like tickets are just on a phone now. There's so many places you can't even go if you don't have a smartphone.
Sure. Well, that just jogged my memory last weekend when we were working together. I don't know if you remember me telling you during the day, I'm cutting the grass. My phone fell out. I ran it over with the lawnmower. Yeah. That's the first time I've destroyed a phone. And then I just thought to myself, well, I guess my life is over now until I get this fixed. I don't know. I can't go on with my day. I was paralyzed, which is sad.
Yeah, it's weird. It's depressing. I mean, I had it. I think we talked about this there too. Like I was in Denver a couple of years ago. My phone just died. It was the end of the road for the phone, I guess, which obviously they could make it so it doesn't end like that. I'm sure they can make a phone that lasts for 50 years. They have, but whatever. But it was the same thing, but it was almost freeing for like a day. You're like, this is amazing. But I have this, and I've talked about it before. I'll try to take a phone break, but if you take a phone break for too long, it has an adverse effect because I start obsessing over what I might be missing, like texts and emails and stuff.
Sure.
So you got to take like 45-minute breaks, because it does happen in comedy, as you know. There's so often in comedy, you get a text or an email that's like, hey, I got a gig. It pays $4,000, but I need to fill it ASAP. And then you're like, I can do it. And they're like, I got somebody else. Sorry.
Yeah. That's happened to me many times. That happened to me this week even. Yeah.
It's the worst.
You got to be on it. I just am waiting for Elon Musk to put the neural implant in me. Then we won't have to think about this anymore.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we wanted to get into a few things. We got time. I appreciate you because you sent topics and like bullet points. So I'm like, great, a guest that's ready and prepared. So let's get into it, because I'm fascinated by a lot of stuff about you, because you're a stand-up comic, but you also are a teacher, or were a teacher, or you still are a teacher.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I taught for the public school system for 21 years. I don't do that anymore. The only teaching capacity that I do now is I teach a stand-up 101 class for teenagers at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle. I mean, that's a huge deviation from what I was doing prior.
What's the best teaching to start talking about first? Your years as high school teaching emotionally impaired kids, right?
Yeah.
Or should we lead up to that, or should we open with that and then get to stand up? Because I mean, teaching stand up, I imagine you're getting a lot of emotionally impaired people as well.
Absolutely.
Or if they're not, they will be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can start with my teaching career. A lot of times people don't really know what that is when I would tell people I'm a teacher, and they'd say, "Oh, what subject do you teach?" And that's kind of secondary. And then I would explain to them, well, I teach students with severe emotional impairments. And then they kind of look at you like you're like a space alien because they don't really know what that means. So then you got to wind it back and say, it's technically special education, but these kids are on diploma track. And, it's tough. I did it for 21 years, and it takes a lot out of you. One time someone described it as teaching in dog years to me, which I thought was a pretty appropriate description.
So that's what I'm not great with math, but that's like 140 years of teaching you did.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm one of these people. So take me through, what does emotionally impaired mean exactly? Is that like autistic on the spectrum, or just people that have been through serious trauma, or you're not working with like Down syndrome people?
No. It's a pretty big umbrella. So really the label is, it's a legal label. So it's something that it qualifies a student for an educational service. So there's a set amount of criteria that you fall into to be labeled emotionally impaired. With that being said, we would have students with a myriad of other issues as well. Oftentimes I think certainly within the last 5 years, we saw that autism spectrum definitely growing within our population and increasing. Right. When I first started doing it 21 years ago, it was more like, just all the bad kids that, needed to be directed a little bit. It was like like one of those 90s movies where the teacher comes in and saves the kids. But as the years went on, and you even talked about the phone, I saw a big pendulum shift in student population just when every kid started having a phone in their hand.
I bet.
Yeah, it kind of exacerbated the symptoms of their impairment, and it increased kind of the dynamic of all those kids communicated with each other now. When I first started, the kids came to our school, they went home. It's not like a community, like a normal school where they got football games and things like that. But not that once we had phones, all of these kids, they're communicating with one another. And a lot of times when you can see this with any relationship, you take someone who has their own set of issues and another person who has their own set of issues, and you combine that together, and it just creates a toxic situation. So, we had a lot of fights at school, a lot of restraints I've done in my career, and the phones really made that worse because the kids would come in and, they'd been arguing all night online. Right. They'd walk in right through the door, and it was go time. It was like a premeditated fight ready to go down.
Right, like a hockey fight. Now, did you ever get any wounds trying to break up these fights? Because high school kids can be. I'm scared of high school kids. I feel like I wouldn't fare well against a lot of these high school kids.
Yeah, so they train us for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when I was talking to you last week, and you were talking about the MMA stuff and things like that, and jiu-jitsu and things like that, I thought to myself, that would have really come in handy. But they train us for this nonviolent crisis intervention. So we have all of this physical intervention that we were trained to do that is designed to keep everyone safe. That being said, didn't always happen. I had a pretty good track record where I never got hurt, but a good coworker of mine had, his finger dislocated. My sister-in-law, coincidentally, she used to work at the school with me too. She'd been like choked out before.
Wow. Jesus.
Yeah. We had police intervention, on a weekly, daily basis.
God, I mean, so this is first of all, you're a goddamn hero. I mean, this is. I always talk about service on this podcast, and I think doing service is like one of the real keys to happiness and a fulfilled life. Did you connect with that and feel good about that? That you're like, I'm doing service for these kids, or was it hard to keep that in perspective because it becomes just a job that's really frustrating? Or were you able to go, I'm doing something really good here?
That's a great question. I think everyone gets into it for a noble reason. There are certainly better career paths you can pick. I mean, Boston Market's hiring for $20 an hour right now.
Is that true?
Yeah, I saw a sign this week that said that. I can't believe it. But I mean, there certainly are more lucrative career paths you can take. So I think everyone gets into it with their heart and their mind and the right perspective. I do think you get jaded over the years. I certainly did. I mean, I even have like a little bit of personal guilt about it because I'm not doing it anymore. And I never planned to. I planned to, retire from it. But over time, it wears on you. I went to a conference on what was called secondary trauma. So that's a good question. A lot of people ask, why are these students emotionally impaired? And there's not a blanket answer for any of that. Some of it can be circumstantial, environmental. Some of it can be genetic. It could be all of the above. And I went to a conference on secondary trauma. So it's this idea that, you're working with these people who have been through some pretty significant trauma in their life. And you aren't necessarily the one who went through the trauma, but over time, you still get the adverse symptoms from the trauma, much like secondary smoke, right? You're not the one smoking, right, but you can still get lung cancer. And it's important to keep that in perspective when you're working with this population, because it's very easy to adapt the behavior to your own lifestyle. And there were employees there that, maybe they didn't have a stable of their own home life outside of there. And, it asks of a lot over time, just like anything. I mean, being a police officer, things like that. If you don't have all of your life outside of that stable, you can come crumbling down with them very quickly.
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, it just seems like that's what I mean. I'm like, I look at this job, just hearing about it, I'm like, I just can't imagine what it was like dealing with that on a daily basis for 20 years. And is that something that you specifically go to school for, or do you end up in that? Do you go to school to be a teacher and then you end up over there? Was it a punishment? Was it something that you're like, let me try to do this? How did it come to be that you ended up teaching these kids?
Yeah. So undergrad, I went to school to be a regular ed teacher. And, when I was going to school, I became a paraprofessional, which is like a teacher aide. And I worked with special needs kids at the time. And they were not EI kids. There's all different flavors of special education. These were, kids that are more like severely cognitively impaired and things like that. And I found that incredibly rewarding as a 19, 20-year-old kid. And when I graduated, I didn't really want to do anything. I didn't want to become a professional anything, but I had a teaching degree. So there was something, and at the time, teaching jobs were hard to find, believe it or not, because we're in the opposite of that now. They'll hire any warm body now.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, we have a huge teaching shortage. I got a note yesterday that on Monday, like my kids' school bus isn't coming to pick them up because they don't have bus drivers right
And
now.
why is that? Is that because of the pandemic and all the money people were making off of unemployment and stuff, or do people just go, "I don't want to be a teacher"? That's insane because there's so much talk about teachers being underpaid. So is word out, and so less people are pursuing that?
Yeah, I mean, it was this last year being a teacher was not an easy task at all.
Right.
And I do a joke on stage about it taking the opposite viewpoint, saying that I'm tired of teachers thinking they're heroes and things like that. But they really are. And yeah, I think it forced a lot of retirements, but
Right.
there aren't a lot of kids going to school to teach anymore because it's kind of a thankless job and you don't get paid a lot, and teachers are more scrutinized than they've ever been
Right.
right
Yeah.
now. I mean, you're incredibly accountable.
Right. And like you said, it has to be so much harder than it's ever been because of the phones, as we've touched on. It's just such a nightmare. And it also feels like, and this is part of a larger conversation, I guess, is that all these stats about like depression going up because of with the advent of Instagram and suicidal kids. And I have a niece that's high school age and she struggles mental health and then her friends do. I mean, I can't believe how many people have stories of nieces and nephews and children who are teenagers that are going to psych wards and are suicidal and on meds and all this crazy stuff. And it just feels like it has to have to do with social media and so many aspects of social media, cyberbullying and comparing with others and everybody posting the best versions of themselves in life and what do you call it, physical appearance, body dysmorphia, whatever the hell it is. It just feels like such an overwhelming task to teach at any level, even if they're not EI kids. It just feels like insane. And then the teachers being underpaid as I understand they are. I don't know how we change that or whatever, but that's a lot to volley back at you.
Absolutely. And and the phone and all that, it just sets a stimulus bar that is impossible for you to match as a teacher. Like, I mean,
Right.
I used to joke with my students, like with the boys, like I'd be like, I could have a naked supermodel up here right now trying to teach you physics, and you'd be like, this is shit. This is
Right.
like,
Well, I say that on stage. I'm talking about how comics will get upset if someone's on their phone, and I'm like, I'm like, I can't even get upset because it's like, how am I supposed to compete with all the world's information? Like, I'm literally like, I got anxiety, and the other day my therapist said such and such, and people are like, let me just check the score of the Bruins game here, and then let me see. Someone sent me a dick pic. I'll check that out. I mean, it is hard to compete. I also, what are your thoughts on? It does seem crazy with trying to teach in school, and this has obviously been brought up a lot, teaching 30 different individuals the same way. The idea of like, we're going to read from this and then give you a quiz, like everybody learns different. It does feel like a strangely antiquated system, but I don't know how to fix that either. But to teach 25 kids at once seems very difficult.
yeah, absolutely. And those are real teachers that do that. I never considered myself a real teacher, and I'll tell you why. Because with the population we work with, the way the law is, I could never have more than 12 students in a classroom on my caseload, and then that also entitled me to 2 teacher aides in the room too. So because these kids qualify for special education services, we call it an individualized education. So all of these kids have specific behavioral and academic goals, but they're all individualized to them. So this is part of why this type of teaching appealed to me to begin with, because when I was a kid, I didn't kind of fit into that box either. And, I was the one in a 30-person classroom who was like completely spacing out and not focusing or anything like that. And that was a big appeal to me when I first started working with this population, is because, it's one-on-one, it's individualized, it's, you're making an impact on all the students, or at least you're trying to.
Right.
And it was a little more rewarding. Plus you're working with all the goofballs and like the kids you relate to a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. Now
I mean, I got to the point where like I have nephews, and they go to a parochial school, and I would go to like their football games. I got to the point where I was like creeped out by emotionally healthy kids because I wasn't used to being around it anymore. And
it's kind of like comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You hang out with non-comics and you're like, what's up with this guy? This guy's all normal and shit.
Yeah, it's like flat affect. Like, yeah, same thing. Absolutely.
Oh, this is a fun one.
Can I start it off?
Sure.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking a break for some dumb idiot crying about their stupid life. We're here to tell you about something more important than that. Joe?
Let's talk about Manscaped. If you're thinking of skipping this ad because you already have a gross trimmer you've used since college, just listen. Stop. I mean, what a perfect person to have on as a fellow as I talk about a beard trimmer. Let's talk about Manscaped, folks. We're talking about your balls here. You can't just use whatever has been rusting away in the shower for years. It's time to grow up and shave with Manscaped. Their Platinum Package 4.0 has everything you need to get grooming.
No more grabbing some leftover razor that some slut you banged fucking 6 months ago left in there and it's got rust on it and soap scum. Guys, that's not the best way to shave your balls. And she's going to want that back.
It comes with the lawnmower get their Platinum Package 4.0. It has everything you need to get grooming. It comes with the lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker 2.0 for ear and nose hair grooming. I use that all the time.
Need that, dude.
I know.
This is what I do when I'm at restaurants and I just...
Oh my God, that's horrible. I use it on my eyebrows too. I brush them up and then I go... Bzz,
I need that. What is it, like a Flowbee?
It's like a little...
For eyebrows?
Stick almost. It looks like a flashlight.
Hey, Manscaped, legit question. Can you just send me one of those for my ear?
Yeah, send one to Ari. He was a guest 3 weeks ago.
What's the promo code for this?
Promo code is it's 20% off.
Full price. Perfect.
Get 20% off and free shipping with the code METAL at manscaped.com. That's 20% off, 1/5 with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code METAL, METAL,
and I'll get 20% off.
Yes,
that's 4/5 the price.
Exactly.
And how much do I pay for shipping? I'll pay nothing for shipping. So that's kind of like 70. Maybe 70 or 60% total.
Exactly. And you can use the Platinum Package because the gold standard is no longer good enough. This thing has the lawnmower, it's got the Crop Reviver ball toner, and their ultra premium line of body products, including deodorant and body wash, which I love and use. They've even sent me some underwear. They got everything over there. Go over there, manscaped.com, and use code METAL. METAL. So I want to talk about comedy because you're also, I don't want to make it seem like you're just a school teacher here, because you're also a really funny comedian, which was so nice because you were MC, and I believe you said you normally feature a headline, but you MC'd that weekend, which was great because a lot of times the MC is just a nightmare to be around and also a horrible comic. So it was nice to have like a real pro on the shows, and you were killing. And I want to get into that. I mean, first of all, so you teach comedy to teenagers, like specifically teenagers, or that's who just ends up taking the class, or you're specifically a teenage?
Yeah, no, we do specifically a teenage class. There is a stand-up 101 class that's for adults, and then there's an advanced class that they teach at the castle too. But yeah, I took on the task of like teaching specifically the teenage kids. That started this summer. It was the first time we ever did it. And really like my angle with that and my goal with that was really kind of focused on mental health, because I know the function of what comedy has served me in my own life. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to share that with kids. I mean, imagine you and I, if we were, I mean, you started pretty early, but like if we were 13, 14 years old and someone's giving you free reign to tell dick and fart jokes and breaking it down of how to structure it and do it correctly. Like, I mean, that would have been life-changing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, like I started when I was 18, but I mean, just comedy in general, like you said, how it served us in life. I think that all the time of like, I deal with depression and anxiety and this feeling of emptiness often in life. And that's with pursuing and doing my dream job and creating and performing for people. And And again, like a feeling of service by entertaining people. If I didn't have that, I cannot imagine. I mean, I sit around, I'm like, I used to be a wild alcoholic and in therapy and all this stuff with comedy. I mean, and comedy also can cause mental health issues as well. It's not an easy profession, obviously. But if I feel like if I didn't have comedy, I mean, I don't, maybe I'd be dead or just miserable or suicidal, whatever it is. It's certainly helped a lot, as I think it has in your life too.
Absolutely. You ever just walk around and you look at civilians and you think to yourself, I can't believe they don't get to do this.
Yeah, it's
I
nice.
think about that all the time.
Yeah, because everyone knows the feeling of getting a laugh. I mean, that's the thing, that everybody has that experience socially at some point. Like basically every single adult has said something that people laughed at some point. Although I know some comics that have never made me laugh once, but but you know what I mean? Everyone knows that feeling and it feels great. So to have it times 100 or 1,000, whatever it is on stage at such a high level, it is like an incredible drug. And it is, I mean, not to sound like pretentious, but it's better than any drug I ever did.
Yeah, I would fully agree. The what's interesting about the first building I worked in teaching is it was fertile soil for comics. I mean, I had a close network of friends that the level of candid conversation we had was almost went beyond conversations with other comics. I mean,
wow.
we have this little text thread that goes, and like if anyone ever monitored that, we would all be in jail. I mean, it was, you know, and I think that it happens for a reason why everyone I worked with was so incredibly funny, because you're not going to be able to survive in that environment working with those students if you aren't approaching everything with levity. There's a direct function of it. And it enabled us to get through our day.
Yeah, it's funny. And I think that's so important in life. Obviously, I mean, I'm a comedian, so obviously I think that, but I was just talking to my buddy about that, my closest friend about, he's like, I approach life as though it's a comedy. And he's like, I meet a lot of people that approach it as though it's a drama. And he's like, I don't know how they live their lives like that. You really do have to be silly. And I've said that before. I'm like, I like this idea that, you know, if I'm lucky enough to be on a deathbed and saying goodbye to people, it's nice, the idea of being like, I spent a lot of my life just kind of joking around. It feels good to be like, I was kind of goofing around. That instinct to just make jokes before being like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I struggle with not being dramatic, obviously, also. But that comedy is such a huge part of our lives, is such a gift.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree. My default setting when something bad happens is to make a joke about it. And,
yeah, which gets us in trouble.
Absolutely, it can.
It's funny though, you talk about like people seeing like a text thread or whatever. I think that all the time when I see people on social media like outraged by something a comedian said, and I'm like, man, if they ever heard what we're saying not on stage, like that's what I always think. I'm like, imagine if these people heard like the Comedy Cellar table.
Sure,
it would just be, I mean, we'd all be shot in the face and sent to prison.
Absolutely,
reverse order.
Yeah, this is the edited, this is the filtered out stuff that you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. So how long have you been doing stand-up? When did you start comedy, and what made you decide to do comedy? And take me through that process.
Yeah, I love answering this question because it's very dear to me. I started a little over 6 years ago. I started at the Comedy Castle where we met, and I had an older brother who unexpectedly had passed away on my 30th birthday.
Wow.
I'm 42 years old now. It was a heart condition. Great guy, married with 3 boys. They were 5, 7, and 9 at the time.
Jesus.
Which impacts me a lot now because I have 2 boys and they're 5 and 7 now.
Wow.
So I look at their age and I think about, you know, if I was gone in an instant, I don't know how I don't know how you go on with life, and so it was just coincidental that my brother happened to pass away on my birthday, and whatever, it's just a day, but it kind of changes that day for you to a certain extent. I feel kind of lucky that it happened, because it's like I share that memory every year with them, and I kind of relive all that.
Right.
But my wife, who is amazing, and very in tune with, what I need and things like that, she never knew how to approach the day years after that. Some years I'd want to party and get hammered with everybody, and other years I wanted to just become reclusive and not talk to anyone. And
Sure.
So yeah, a little over 6 years ago, she said, keep your birthday day open. I got something special planned for you. I thought we were going to go to the zoo, or like, an apple orchard or something. And she gave me an envelope that morning, and she goes, I signed you up for a stand-up 101 comedy class.
Oh,
And,
wow. Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah. And she said, you leave for it in 2 hours. She goes, it's a 6-week class. It ends with a performance.
Wow.
And yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it's the greatest gift that's anyone has ever given me, and she's regretted it every day since. But yeah, so she gave me that, and the feeling I had at the time was like, it was very similar to the first time she told me we were gonna have a kid, because you're so excited, but you're worried that, am I up for the challenge? Can I do this? And I'd always been a huge fan of comedy. That's what we did. We went to shows, but I didn't know the process. I didn't know how you start doing it and go from there. I didn't know you could just decide to do comedy and then just do comedy,
Yeah,
So,
I love that Seinfeld had that thing. It's the only profession that the first time you do it, they introduce you as that thing.
yeah.
Like they're like,
yeah.
here is a comedian. And you're like, all right, I guess I'm a comedian. Like they're never like, all right, you're a surgeon. Here's a knife, and just start cutting until they feel better. So you must have talked about wanting to be a comedian or love for comedian. I mean, that she knew that, because it's not like she did that and then that was a fun thing. You're now a professional comedian. So obviously you had some inkling that you wanted to be a comedian, or she was aware of that. Was that something you were talking about leading up?
Yeah. I mean, I always said I would love to. I always said I want to do it once. But that's, no one's doing comedy once.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I always said it was like a bucket list type thing. But I didn't know a class existed. I didn't know anything about this. She did all that research on her own. Again, I didn't know what the process was. But I have a very submersive personality, or I guess you could say addictive, or however you want to call it. Sure. And that's manifested itself in many different ways throughout my life. And I, kind of become very obsessed with something for a very long time. And then I try to be as good as I can at it. And prior to that, I raced bikes for a very long time, bicycles. And it was a big part of my life. And when we had kids, I walked away from that because it was a huge time constraint. And I had this little period in my life where I didn't have a thing, and you have energy and it's got to get channeled somewhere.
Right.
And, I had young children to care for, and that was kind of a thing. But my wife recognized that he needs a passion again.
Right.
And she thought, oh, you can dabble in this. It's good. It doesn't take up as much time. You can do a show here and there,
Yeah. Whoops.
Yeah.
So your kid you must have had a 1-year-old and just one kid. Is that right? Am I doing my math right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you've been a comedian basically your kid's entire life, essentially.
Yeah. And which is and my entire life at the time was behavior management, from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, because I was a teacher and I was a new father. And so even to this day, I have so much material that I want to kind of deviate away from just the kid stuff. But it's so hard when, I remember you said, my whole act right now is like dick and shit jokes because, you've been in the pandemic and that's all you're doing is shitting and, and,
it's just sex and shitting.
Yeah. And so, mine's kids,
Yeah,
So,
no, that's fair. And now do the kids understand, have a concept that their dad is a comedian yet? Or do they know what that is?
yeah, they're starting to understand that a little bit more. And like, I've shown them clips every once in a while and things like that. And then, they're funny themselves as well.
Sure.
It's very interesting to watch children learn that about themselves and recognize that they have that quality and that trait. My oldest son, he just loves getting reactions out of people, whether they're disgust or or a laugh or anything like that. And so they're aware of what I do now. But now, like, if a big laugh happens whenever we're as a family or at a gathering, my oldest son will look at me and always go, "Dad, that's potential comedy, isn't it?"
Oh, wow.
So
that's beautiful.
He's like mining already for, material.
God, that's great. I love hearing that. That's like beautiful. I'm reminded of a story. My friend Paul Nardizzi is a comedian, and he had up in Boston. He's great, but he had little kids. And his kid was like 3 or something, and he's like, "Dad, you left your comedy boots on the on the rug or something," and they're just like regular boots but he puts them on to go to a show, and so his 3-year-old kid calls them his comedy boots, which I thought was hilarious. The idea of comedy boots made me laugh. Just a regular shoe, but it just seems so fun to me to be like, "Yeah, my dad's a comedian." I mean, that's such a cool thing. To an answer to what does your father do? He's a comedian is so neat to me, but maybe that just seems exciting.
I agree. Yeah, I think so too. And I think that I hope they embrace it with time. And if it's something they want to, try out, I'd be all for that.
Yeah. Now, when you're going, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it'll save me a lot of money for not sending them to college. I
feel that way all the time. I'm like, the way I look at my parents owe me like $400,000 by not going to school. Not that I could have gotten into a school that cost that much money anyways. Hi, folks. I'm back with my friend Ari Shafir, who is not the guest on this episode, but he really, really wants to tell you about Factor. When I'm feeling I don't
have time, Joe, to cook a whole meal. What is that going to take me? 3-4 minutes? I don't have 3 or 4 minutes. What do you got for me?
No, this is much easier. Factor. You got to get Factor Fresh. This takes just 2 minutes.
I'm in. I was just talking about not having 3 minutes.
2 minutes.
Oh.
When I'm feeling overwhelmed, the first thing to do to go on the back burner is cook a nutritious meal. I'm always ordering Uber Eats. It's like $60 a meal. It's always some cheesy crap. What I want to do is cook at home healthy meals. Before I even know what's happening, I find myself going to McDonald's. But if you're trying to break the stress to drive-through cycle, Factor has you covered.
They got any healthy vegetables like broccolini?
They got broccolini. They got everything. They got all the healthy stuff. They even have smoothies.
What?
They are America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Everything is delivered right to your door so you can stay on top of your health goals and your busy schedule. How do you eat at home? You eat pretty healthy?
No.
I don't eat healthy either until I order Factor. That's why
Factor?
I get it.
What is it? Is it frozen?
No, it's not frozen. You cook it.
You cook it?
Yes, it's Factor's Fresh, never frozen.
Oh, wow.
Never frozen. Meal times are quick, easy, and delicious with over 34 weekly quality options. There's always something new to try, and Factor's flavor-packed meals fit in a variety of lifestyle from keto and calorie-conscious to vegan and vegetarian. Right now, folks, do it right now. Head to factormeals.com/metal50. Use the code METAL, that's METAL 50, to get 50% off. That's code METAL50 at factormeals.com/metal50 to get 50% off. That's the best deal you're going to get.
No one gives you a 50% off deal.
I mean, that's insane.
That's insane. It's almost like if you talk to those guys, you'd be like, I want you around as a sponsor for a while. It doesn't seem like the way to stay in business.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I've had it. I loved it. Back to the show. Now, I want to go back to your brother passing away. Was his heart condition something that we knew about, or was it completely sudden and out of the blue?
completely sudden and out of the blue. Yeah, actually, after that morning he had the flu. It was actually the H1N1 virus. Remember
Oh,
that?
wow. Yeah.
So he had the flu and he stayed home from work, and his he put his kids to bed, and his wife was in the other room working on the computer, and she just heard him snoring erratically. And when she
Jesus.
went in the room, he was laying on the floor, not breathing. And it was a couple months before we even knew what happened, or
Wow.
the doctors had kind of a diagnosis of what got him. And ultimately, it was the doctors kind of explained it as a perfect storm. So you had like a combination of the flu, and then we found out that he had an enlarged heart, and he hadn't been to the doctor in like 3 years. So, and then it was cardiomyopathy. So like when you hear some of these like high school athletes that just kind of keel over on the floor, it was similar to that, which at the time, was alarming for me because I was still an athlete at the time and kind of physically taxing my body every day. And, it makes you think like, what if I have this genetic thing going on too,
Yeah. And is that something you can test for or whatever? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I did a whole little makeup shortly after that, but then I just did like 2 holidays ago, because I had started having like high blood pressure and some chest pains. I've never had that before. And so I had and it just turns out I'm like drinking way too much caffeine all the time.
Right. Yeah. A lot of that stress and anxiety. I mean, I've had chest pains my whole life from anxiety. I hope. Just from
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah. But it just makes you look at everything different. You don't, you emotionally plan for your parents to not be here one day.
Right.
From the moment you're born, you understand they're older than me.
Right.
They aren't going to be here all the time. You never grow through life thinking one of my siblings is not going to be here anymore.
Right. Now, were your parents around still? Are they still around now? And were they around then?
Yeah. Yep. They, both my parents are living. They live in a very small town in the thumb of Michigan. They're still around. It impacted them certainly.
Yeah, I bet.
They went through kind of a lot of loss at that time, but I would say it kind of crippled them emotionally a little bit to the point where I don't know if they fully recover, or if I don't think they'll ever recover.
Yeah.
And they're getting older, and I think, just that it kind of made them get older even quicker,
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's almost like a cliche that outliving your children is like such a brutal tragedy. But yeah, I just can't imagine. And I think the only thing you can do, right, is just accept that feeling and just be like, okay, I'm in this feeling right now. There's no way to like, in your mind or in my mind, I'm like, all right, if I do enough yoga and go to church and whatever thing, but it just, there's nothing that can fully recover you from that other than to just go, let me feel these feelings, and it's going to be unpleasant.
Yeah, I think everyone in my family kind of reacted different and dealt with it differently. My brother's wife is amazing and one of the strongest human beings that I've ever known, and her primary focus after this has always been to, keep her children at the forefront of her priorities. And
Right.
they've done miraculously well for losing their father at that young of an age. For me personally, like, I remember thinking shortly after it happened, that coming to this realization that this is either going to impact me very positively, or it's going to impact me incredibly negatively. But I have to make a concerted choice right now and commit to that path. And I remember thinking, like, I'm only going to allow this to impact me positively because my brother was a really good guy, and he lived a great life, and he was a good person to be around. And I knew that if I let myself fall off the rails because of this, I'm kind of discrediting his entire life, and I'm not really honoring who he was. So I can honestly say to this day, like, I think I'm a better person for having lost him.
That's incredible. I mean, that is like so beautiful and inspiring because it's like, and that's the essence of life is like, you're like, I have to make the best of what this is. I mean, there's no other option. You can't really get out of life and be alive. I mean, it's like, it's,
Yeah.
you're in life. So you have to just make the best of it. We're here. It's the only earth and life we get. And I love that idea of honoring him by living well, because it is a thing it's not hard to imagine him watching or being aware of something going, well, what the hell are you doing? I don't want you to be miserable. And so it's beautiful to turn it into a positive, and then to pursue comedy and to pursue it well is so great. And to be a great father, as I'm sure you are, just from spending a couple hours with you.
Yeah.
I imagine you are. And you still see his wife and kids a good amount?
Yeah, they're actually my neighbors. So
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, they my sister-in-law. So my brother was 9 years older than me, and he started dating his wife when they were 16 years old, and that was it. So
Wow.
I've known her since I was 6 or 7 years old. So I mean, I regard her as my sister. I don't remember a time in my life when she wasn't around.
Right.
So she's a teacher as well. She ended up remarrying to a guy who is fantastic. He's been incredibly sensitive to our entire family situation. He's always, like my parents are like his in-laws, but there's no reason why they need to be in his life, but that's kind of, he took the family on completely.
Wow.
So yeah, I still talk to, yes, they're my neighbors, which is great because I get to see two of my nephews are in college now. The other one's a senior in high school, but yeah, I get to see them, and I don't. Life is busy. I don't get to go over there quite as often as I'd like to, but it's nice knowing that they're close by.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I mean, this is like a film. I would make a film like this where, you have this terrible tragedy and it feels like everything is a mess. And then we cut to years later and you're a successful stand-up comedian, and the family lives next door. I mean, this is like unbelievable. I feel like it's almost like if you pitched it, they'd be like, it's a little too sweet to wrap up like that. It's too much.
We need some more tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's great, and I'm glad to hear all of that. And no, you should feel great about all these things, about the family and the stand-up comedy career.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that. I just recently, within the last year, started talking about it all on stage. And I should say that, like, when I first started doing comedy, like I never really wrote down goals for comedy. I don't know if you write down goals and things like that, but I did write down one goal, which was just to talk about my brother on stage. And I recognized when I first started that, like, I need to get good enough to be able to do that. And like, I knew I was not good enough to do that yet.
Yeah, it's hard. It does take, my wife always talks about that, who's a comedian as well. And she, I think, read it somewhere. It's like at the beginning, when you're an artist, you're never as good as you want to be because you have such taste for what you like and what you love, but you're not good enough to pull off what you think is great. You know what I mean? Like you're like, I like George Carlin and Richard Pryor, and then you've done 3 sets, so you're like, oh man, I suck so bad because I want to be like those guys. And eventually you get to a point where you're like, your skill level comes up and you're like, now I can talk about those things that I wanted to talk about, but I didn't have the skill to do it.
Yeah, it's a slow increment though. I mean, I still walk around thinking I suck, and like
Oh, of course, that never goes away.
yeah, comedy is like it's the like golf game of art. Like you're never gonna be as good as you want to be, but I am happy that I'm starting to talk about that on stage. I like it because, and maybe you can relate to this. I mean, when you got a bit that you've done over and over and over again, sometimes you find yourself going into autopilot on stage, and you're not
Yes,
necessarily thinking about the emotion or what ingredients went into that joke. You're just kind
of
of,
course.
I mean, you can be thinking about something completely different on stage and be in the joke. The one thing I like about when I get to that moment in my set where I can start talking about my brother is, regardless, it always brings me to being very present on stage. It's
Yeah,
impossible not to, because I mean, there's been times where I kind of had to like fight back tears a little bit when I was talking about it on
sure.
stage.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Uh, I was just gonna say that those things are so helpful to bring you into the moment because exactly what you said. It's stand up. It's so hard to be mindful while you're doing stand up because there's this other thing going on where you're like, what should I do next? How many jokes do I have left? Where am I at time wise? Why is that guy looking at the ground? Why is her arms folded? What's the doorman doing back there? It's amazing. I think it's hard for an audience to understand how much we're thinking about besides what we're saying. So it is when you do new material or really personal material or kind of crowd work, improvised material, it does take you back into the moment. But it's almost like when you read, sometimes you'll read like 3 pages and you realize you're like, I've been thinking about my dinner. I don't even know what I just read,
Yeah,
but I was
that's a good
reading.
analogy. Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
it kind of like I just did 4 minutes of material that I don't even know what the hell I was talking about. You have to kind of snap back into it, and that's something I try to do with stand up is to be remind myself that I am there for other people. I'm here to entertain those people instead of just looking at the audience as like an opponent or my career as my career and go, let me try to bring joy to these individuals who are here. And it really helps. It makes for a better show for everybody.
I absolutely agree. And I would say, like, all those times, like when you look back at what you would regard as some of your, best shows, they're always when you're fully present and, the energy you're putting out is equivalent to the energy they're giving back to you. And, that's when the magic happens. That's what we're kind of all chasing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just the best. When I shot my special, I Hate Myself, I was, anxious before and I called my friend, name drop Colin Quinn, and he said exactly that. He's like, you got to just forget about your career and yourself and try not to think about yourself and just think about these people that took the train in to come see the show. They want to see a good show and just think about them. And it made like the best show I've ever done in my life. So I try to be conscious of that.
That's how you feel about your current special?
Yeah, I mean that show is just like unbelievable. Not just like the
Yeah.
material, but like that set was just like they were just so supportive and just the crowd was like on fire through the whole thing. So
Yeah, it's a great special. I love it. I've
oh,
listened to it
thanks.
multiple times, but that's so great that you feel that way about it though, because I mean, I know so many people who record something and they've led up to it, and then no one's ever fully content with what they put out. You're never getting like the greatest version of it. So that's good that you feel that it was one of those dynamite nights.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of comedy that I always tell. That's why I don't watch specials or late nights that much because it's like I just know how much better it was in the room. Comedy
Yeah.
more than any other art form is about like you got to be in the room for it. It's just it's such a unique thing that any depiction on via video is just not as good. It can be great.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's great specials, but you're like, man, in the room, it was better.
Yeah, someone once analogized it to me as watching porn versus actually having sex.
Right, right. That's a
Right.
great way to put it. Yeah, exactly. Well, then this has been so great, Tim. I really appreciate it, and it's a shame that I have to bank these episodes because one like this I just want to put out immediately because it was so great, and I appreciate willingness and honesty, and it was really great. It's funny because I was talking to you last week, and I was like, "Oh, this would make a great mindful metal jacket," and it's better than I even expected. So, thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll be honest. I had like a little. I was really excited to work with you because I'm a big fan of yours and Sarah's, and I was telling my wife like the night before. I had like a lot of imposter syndrome going on, and I'm like, I just want them to like. I just want to make a connection with them. That's all. Like, I don't, I don't, that will be a successful weekend for me if I go away and like, I was able to have some good conversations and make a connection with them. And I felt like we did that. And I really appreciate this opportunity to be on here.
No, it was great. I appreciate you being here. So where can people find you? What's your Instagram or website or all that good stuff? Twitter?
Oh, yeah, I'm terrible with that. Because I was a teacher for so long, I kind of kept comedy like as like a vigilante side thing. And I wasn't like real public with it. But I'm just tim.paul.finkel on Instagram. I should probably figure out how Instagram works a little bit better. And
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, I'm not good at self-promotion and terms of online at all. I recognize it's a necessity of the business, but I'm not good at it at all. Well, but you can find me on Instagram.
At some point, record an album, tape it at the Comedy Castle, whatever, throw it on YouTube so people can find it because you got great stuff and it really helps. People just want to be able to find this stuff on YouTube nowadays. Is what I'm learning.
Yeah, I recorded a really good 45-minute set a few months ago that I have a buddy of mine like chopping up and editing into like specific bits, and then I plan on like going public finally.
Perfect. So, yeah. Go public with your comedy career.
Yeah. Yeah. No, now that I'm not teaching anymore, I don't have to worry about like a parent coming to me and being like, "Yeah, I saw you talking about your wife's breast on stage."
No, it's scary. It's scary. I always think about that. If I ever had a child, the idea of being at like a PTA meeting or whatever, and they're like, "Didn't you say jizz on my father's face on YouTube or something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sorry about that." But
but you got to go. Yeah, but I did it to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I'm trying to bring joy. So, all right, Tim, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was a great first guest back, and it was awesome. Thank you.